Okay, so here we have it. It is our July member resource group, and I'm really excited for our conversation this month in regards to safety. And one of the reasons why is one, I feel like we've been building to this discussion over the past few member resource groups of really focusing on the need within our employee well-being strategies to ensure that we are focusing on the basic human needs during this time of a pandemic, during a time of social justice movements, and serving our people well. Additionally, we have slightly touched on the conversation of psychological safety in our April member resource group, and we'll get to that review in a little bit here. So this is just a very timely conversation to have with everybody, and we get to also welcome 3 new idea sharers to our member resource group. So that being said, I am going to navigate here to just some interesting data and result to our follow-up statewide survey. So it seems like ages ago in March, March to early April, WCWI launched a statewide survey in support of just providing a touch point of how are all of our member employers initially responding to the coronavirus pandemic. And in late June, we did a follow-up survey, knowing of all the changes that took place in the few short but long months that we were experiencing with the Safer at Home Act and adjusting to whatever our next transition was. We wanted to connect with everyone because we were also receiving questions as an organization supporting employers throughout the state and their employee well-being strategies. So our most recent Part 2 survey included an 18% participation rate. And one thing that I want to note from this survey is that 85% of our employer participants reported that they are prioritizing mental health and emotional well-being for the remainder of the year. So that's surpassing the physical health of 67%. You guys, that is crazy, and that's a crazy positive statistic to show that a lot of our employers are significantly pivoting. We are focusing on that connection of mental health, of critical thinking, and helping our employees thrive with their the basic needs that we have as humans. So one thing that I want to note is that if you're interested in obtaining this entire well-practiced results of our statewide survey, we have it on our WCWI member dashboard. You can always email WCWI at wellnesscouncilwi.org right here in the right-hand corner, and we can email you directly the well-practiced with all the results and the data and the shared strategies, which is why we're here today. The other aspect of the statewide survey provided the focus for today's member resource group and the growing concern that each and every one of our participants stated around creating a workplace of safety, but in recognition that safety has two components. It's rooted and it's founded in physical safety and psychological safety. And we know now more than ever during the coronavirus pandemic, through the social justice movement itself, that these characteristics of well-being, of safety, and critical thinking are so interconnected. You can't address one without addressing all 3. So today, we've built our member resource group around that. Safety, specifically diving into physical safety and psychological safety. We have 3 idea sharers today. We have Holly Schneider with Delta Defense. We have Jay Kanitzer with Hellwig Carbon Products. And then in support of Tammy not being able to participate today, I actually bombarded her with thousands of questions. So I get to give you all of the strategies and initiatives that they are launching at Masters Gallery Foods, which some are quite creative and some are some tangible tools. And all 3 of these are bringing a wealth of experience and wealth of storytelling to our conversation today. As I gave a little bit of a preview in the beginning of our member resource group, we actually kind of started this conversation in safety in our April member resource group. we had Dr. Deborah Laffler with the Wisconsin Department of Health Services speak to trauma-informed care, and specifically too, she zoomed in on trauma-informed leadership. And this is one thing that I would highly encourage each and every one of you to go back to this April member resource group, watch the recording, download the slides from the member resource group, and kind of zoom in on trauma-informed care, because it specifically relates to creating a psychologically safe workplace. And there's some great quick takeaways on leading with soft skills rather than those hard skills of policies, procedures, and discipline. And if you have additional questions, Dr. Deborah Laffler is there. Her contact information is listed, and we're happy to connect you with her. But just know, as a WCWI member, you have access to these archive member resource groups. And also, too, we will include it in the follow-up email as well. All right, so that being said, our first idea share is Holly Schneider. I'm going to bring you up on the screen, Holly, as I give your introduction so everyone can see you. And the reason I'm so excited about Holly being an idea share with us today is that she's truly shifting the cultural norm at Delta Defense, with an outstanding percentage of employees participating in their life coaching and psychoeducation sessions. Now, Holly is a licensed clinical social worker and life coach, working in the mental health field for 28 years. She has worked in residential, in-home family therapy, inpatient, and outpatient clinical practice. She is currently working on Delta Defense as a corporate life coach and a cultural trainer, providing mental health services for all employees during the workday. She has developed a toolbox for anyone interested in understanding and growing aspects of their mental health. So, Holly, if you can just unmute whether it's your computer or your phone, if you need help, I can assist you with that, but feel free to take it away. All right.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that really kind introduction. I'm super excited about talking about this topic. I would never have imagined myself working in corporate America 2 years ago. I've always been incredibly passionate about mental health, saw myself as a clinician, and when I got the opportunity to shift into the corporate sort of environment, I actually laughed. Our CEO had approached me and said, "I really think you need to come and work for me." And I just chuckled. I was like, "No, I'm a clinician. I don't work in, I don't even know how to turn on a computer." And that was actually true. And he said, "No, I think really we get to change lives by shifting the way people see mental health in the workplace. Let's reduce stigma. Let's actually make this a part of the workday." And I was so excited about the fact that somebody wanted to do that, particularly in the Midwest, that I agreed to come aboard and see if I could figure out how to do that. So I did create a HIPAA compliant program where people can privately through a portal reach out to me, schedule sessions with me throughout the workday, regardless of your position at Delta. And we create individual plans. We do group sessions, which are more connected to emotional intelligence and hot topics that are happening, anything from grief to priority management, retraining thoughts, managing emotions, and dealing with anxiety. You name it, we will target those issues in the workplace. And it's been quite a ride. I would say within the first 6 months, already 25% of the population at Delta had started their life coaching services, which is pretty cool. Right now, I'm seeing, when I got hired a year ago, we had 150 people in the workplace, and now we have 400. So we have really grown significantly in the last year and a half, and over half the population of Delta does life coaching. So it's become a real thing. And it's kind of cool. Like people talk about it openly, and I've always been in the, keep it private, really respect people's confidentiality, but here you don't have to. I can walk down the hallway and people will be like, hey, Holly, I need to have a session with you, really struggling this week. And they can be in a group of 10 people, because we are promoting a workplace where transparency and vulnerability is accepted. And it is the basis for people to create solutions for change. And when people are happier at home, they're happier at work. And when they're happier at work, they're happier at home. It really works beautifully together. So I'm excited to be able to have this experience, and also to be able to share it, because when I did come aboard, I made sure I kept my contacts in my previous positions available, because I didn't know if this was going to be a thing, but it really has taken off, and it's made such a huge difference with our entire organization, both on an individual level, on a micro level, but also on a macro level in terms of the systems and the departments that are available. So please ask questions through this if you have specific questions, but I hope to share some stories about kind of what we're doing and what's making a difference. I completely feel like a workplace psychological safety has to do with employees being comfortable and being honest about how they're feeling and performing in their jobs and in their lives in general. A lot of people will not share how they're doing. Their concern is, and I heard this right away, concern is that their boss will judge them, or that they will be seen as weak or not capable of doing their job. But when vulnerability and transparency is allowed, engagement and focus and internal motivation skyrocket. And we saw that really quickly, because people started developing a language using the tools that were given to them, where they could say, well, you know what, I'm not going to worry about that because that's not my backpack, which is a statement that I use. You got to know what's in your backpack. Or people would say to their boss, look, I need to reset for a minute. Can I have 5 minutes before I lean into this conversation? Which is also a phrase that we use. So once people had a toolbox to use and a language to use, they no longer had to hide how they were feeling, because they could lean into that pretty quickly. We also want people to be open and transparent about the relationships that they have with others, both at work and personally, with the idea that it's not gossip connected or information spreading, but it's solution oriented. Any obstacles to their function, it's important for managers and coworkers to, in order to be supportive and to encourage use of the tools, to be open about where they're functioning, so that we can get people back to work as quickly as possible. And having dialogue of difficult conversations with solutions connected to what their individual needs are. I love to remind people, we don't just look at symptoms of problems. We have to look at the whys behind problems, because when you're going to make a real impact, you have to address core issues. For example, if somebody is really disengaged from their job, the issue is not disengagement. It is what is going on that's causing the disengagement that can be addressed to create the solution and re-engagement as quickly as possible. We have lots of phrases here like fall fast, fall quickly. And so if there's going to be a setback, we need to be able to lean into that setback so that it can happen quickly and we can address it in a timely fashion. Using core company culture, we have core values that we talk about every week as a whole group. The organization comes together for a full-on agency meeting once a week on a Thursday, and we talk openly about core issues that are happening, so that we can address moments where we're seeing people as problems instead of seeing people as people. Looking at how we nurture relationships and create solutions with people rather than about people. Having, like I said, difficult conversations so that we can promote resilience. Using accountability language and follow-ups so that we can measure any change plan that's created. and having a resource so that people can have emotional mentors, they can have written materials, they can access referrals for family members. Most people, when they're struggling with mental health, whether or not it's high anxiety or depression, or maybe marital problems, it could be problems with a manager or a coworker, could be a miscarriage or a death in the family, or even a personal crisis moment. They need to have somebody that they can go to quickly, rather than accessing maybe an EAP appointment or an appointment through their insurance and waiting 3 weeks or 4 weeks to get that appointment. If they can say, hey, Holly, what do you have today? Can you make time for me? And then they come and talk immediately. We have a plan that same day. That is significantly different than most company cultures. And so these are the strategies that we use. And I'll get contacted. To be honest, I had a couple of weeks ago, one of our HR people said, they contact me, Holly 911. When I always know that means, okay, answer your message right away. And they had somebody here who was suicidal. It was an anniversary date of her fiance's death, and she was having suicidal ideation. She had gone through a really significant depression after her fiance was killed. And I was able to see her that day and avoid hospitalization, avoid all sorts of stuff that would have probably taken place had she gone to an outpatient appointment. But I knew her. And so we sat down, created a plan. I followed up with her every single day for the next week. And actually she's back to work doing extremely well. So there are some real great advantages of having somebody on staff that is able to provide that mental health service immediately.
Hey, Holly, this is Lisa.
Yes.
I remember when you first told me that story, and we discussed the importance of the message that was given in that scenario to that employee of, we are your team and we are here for you.
Yes.
And that it's more than passing a contact and a phone number or an email, and it's more than a policy and steps on a piece of paper. It is, Delta Defense has a process in place where if this happens, we have you, who is a part of the team, who is Delta Defense, to have these conversations with your employees. So I really commend you and your team for that. I do have a couple questions on your strategies, because I think there's a lot of great meat and content here, but right. I would be so interested to hear how this all came about, in the sense that you mentioned that Delta Defense has grown from 100 to 400 people in a matter of a few years, and now nearly half of them use your services. That's 200 people that you are supporting and creating a norm of what you said, to create a toolbox.
Yes.
So here I'm picturing where you had great leadership support in the beginning.
Yes.
Because they specifically sought you out, said that we need your services here. What was the next step then? Because you're coming in with your clinical services and your clinical experience, and now you're bringing it to, how did you operationalize it? That's my question to you.
Well, I had no idea what I was doing at first, to be honest.
Well, we appreciate that honesty, because I think we all can relate that at some point in our role, it's supporting people. We're a little deer in headlights. So we appreciate the honesty. It's
so true. One of the core values here is get shit done. That's really actually what we say all the time. It's on our walls. And so I remember when the CEO, he said to me, he goes, I don't know what to do. I have no idea what to do with this. This is yours. Just get it done. And he's like, whatever you need, come ask questions. We'll try to help you as much as we can. But he just really believed we could make this work. And when he introduced me to the company, he said, I'm willing to have my butt in her office every week. So is my executive team. So if we can do that, so can you. And so from the top down, he made it really safe for people to say, hey, I would love to have a life coach. I'd love to have somebody I could talk to. So he really, I credit him for his very, very openness and transparency of just saying, you're going to see me walk into her office. Mm-hmm. The other thing is we have we have a cultural program that we use through Arbinger Institute, and they've written a series of books that we really follow religiously here. And one is leadership and self-deception, the outward mindset, and the anatomy of peace. And because when I came aboard, the recommendation was that I would learn the Arbinger and train people in Arbinger rather than bringing people outside, from the Arbinger Institute here to train people. People got, like, in their first week of training. So if you get hired here, and we were growing like leaps and bounds, I think, because of what's going on in the world. But when a person would come in for training, I was one of the first people they saw. So because I would do the Arbinger 2-day training program, talking to them about the mindset that we keep. So I do think that was one of the tools immediately that allowed people to see that this is just a normal part of functioning here. And it's not something to be afraid of. You don't have to hide problems. We can talk about them openly, and we will work on them. And that was done from the very gate.
So you've had the leadership support, the communication was there, where your leadership was visible and vocal about where this service is a part of who we are as a culture and what we do. So they provided that example. And then you're talking about this employee touch point of onboarding. Are there other employee touch points where you were a part of in showcasing the services that everyone had access to?
I really think it was the Arbinger training that was important. That's probably the most. I think the skills for success groups, which are offered to everybody throughout the company, virtually and in person, on core topics. So I'd send a survey out that said, hey, these are all 20 different topics. Rate these and tell me what you want. And I would get a flood of information saying, yes, we'd like stuff on motivation. Yes, we'd like stuff on this. And so I'd create a group and very quickly get people into those groups throughout the workday that started opening up the dialogue, that we have about being open about your mental health. I think the groups, both the cultural group with Arbinger and also the skills for success groups were critical. And then it was just word of mouth. A couple people would come and see me and they'd be like, this was so great. And they would walk out the door and say, that was the best half an hour of my life. I think you should do it. And so really, it's like anything. It's word of mouth. People say, yes, please use that service. You won't regret it. And it's just kind of taken off. So, and it's from the top down, which is really wonderful.
That's great. So Holly, I know that I completely hijacked your conversation today with these questions. So here's what I think we should do. You tell me when to switch the slide, because I know you have more to share, but I also know that we have a few of our members sending us questions. Chloe, I received your question. Trust me, I had that too. So we do have a section for Q&A with Holly. I know I hijacked that personally. So how about this? Let's continue on. You tell me when to switch the slides, and then we will save questions for Q&A, because I just want to be cognizant of time here too.
Okay, let's move into leadership communication. Leadership team communication.
Great.
Slide 4.
Yep. Do you see that on the screen here, Holly? Yes. Okay, perfect.
When it comes to leadership team, I think it really does have to, like, if we're going to focus on mental health, we can't do it in little pieces. It has to be across the board. So executive wellness coaching is I think critical so it's not just giving strategies for individual people, but it's really making it in all different situations. Things like teams, that if a team is struggling with another team, that we're accessing, that we're reaching out and saying, hey, can we use this particular tool for conflict resolution? Or like utilizing the language on a regular basis. One of the things I will do is I'll do a blog every day. And so every morning I begin my day with a blog on mental health awareness in some way, shape, or form. A tool, I do Monday motivation, Tuesday toolbox, Wednesday wellness Wednesday, thankful Thursdays, and fun fact Friday that has to do with mental health. And people will, in our communication system thread all day long about things that they read, and that language is used then in all different scenarios at work, when somebody is in crisis, when somebody is angry with another person. We have a phrase that we use, it's called in the box. We use that from Arbinger, and it means when you're stuck, when you go into a reaction rather than really an intentional choice. And so people will say, oh, I'm super in the box with my manager. I want to get out of the box so I can solve this problem. So there's this language that has to happen. And if all levels utilize that language, and it's not just done here and there, you're going to see communication change across the board. Having discussions with HR. I know I will meet with our HR, our people director, and she will ask things like, are there patterns you see without violating any sort of privacy? Are there patterns you see in any part of our organization that need to be changed? And I will identify that. That's pretty useful. Because those are goals that are created to address issues rather than just gloss over them. We have surveys that are done on a regular basis. I promote the HR wellness plans, because I don't run the wellness plan here. That's HR does that. But we have, because I see people on a regular basis, encouraging people to access the wellness plan that we have is something that needs to be done, because many people will read about it and go, oh yeah, that's kind of cool, but then they won't do it. So there's all sorts of things that will promote better accountability and better communication with the organization. I know I want to talk about psychoeducation, so let's look at that. I have a definition. It's an approach to changing individual and systemic behavior by education sharing, understanding the real core needs and values of people, connecting resources, and using clinical frameworks, because clinical frameworks for change are really helpful in the workplace. And those are things like cognitive behavioral tools and DBT tools, dialectical behavioral tools. These are tools that promote very specific skills that help people be emotionally more aware, more regulated, and interact better with other people. So these are that psychoeducation built in to an employment situation is absolutely fantastic. And that's a training piece. And we do a lot with training. And I know that's expensive, but it does pay off. It's what I hear over and over from people saying, nobody trains you better than Delta, because we have training. If you want training or you need training, we'll have conversations about what that is and how to access training, because it will inspire change rather than just correcting a situation.
So everyone, just to give you a little background, when Holly completed the survey and our Wellness Amid COVID Part 2 survey, she listed this as one of their strategies as they move forward through this pandemic in creating psychological safety. And so I told her, you need to come talk about this, because I don't know what it is, and therefore I'm assuming others out there would learn something new. And so, Holly, my question for you, can you give us a real specific example of this and how it lives within Delta, and like what the experience is for the employee?
Yes, I have a gal that I've been working with since I came here. She is just one of the most delightful people. 4 children, going through a divorce. And when COVID hit, she had 4 children to educate while doing her job full time, and she needed that job full time. She is so tenacious, but was really falling apart. And so I met with her and her team, like her team manager, and we created a plan where she could do split work. So she could begin her day and end her day working while teaching her children in the middle of the work day. And we really sat down and said, we want this to work. But she was really kind of a hot mess for a couple of weeks, because it was really difficult at first. And I remember thinking, boy, if we weren't at Delta, this girl would be somebody that people would say should be fired. Well, this gal is beating everybody's numbers in terms of sales, hands down, because we have worked with her. Her character was spot on. but her situation was genuinely difficult to go through a divorce and some really difficult, and she went through a divorce at the same time her parents were going through a divorce while COVID was going on, plus losing a loved one and having to maintain this job full time. I mean, it was just the most unbelievable circumstances, but she's thriving. And she's thriving because we sat down and created a plan that was really going to fit her needs. And we weren't worried about whether or not she was going to get her job done. She's got KPIs she's got to follow. She's got a rubric that she follows, but she's nailing it. And that's an example of really seeing somebody, asking questions, finding out what their values are and what their needs are, and connecting them to the appropriate amount of resources. And she saw me every week. She still sees me every week for 30 minutes a week to make sure she stays on task with her goals. That works.
Thank you so much for sharing that example. And I know for many of you who are thinking, well, Holly, Lisa, we are a small employer and we do not have a full-time life coach on our team. Don't worry, we've allotted some time for that. So we're gonna keep going, but don't worry, we have some time for that as well.
You bet. Okay, let's look at obstacles, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time because I don't want to take the whole hour here, but I want you to be able to see what are the things that you, as a company, you could start leaning into a little bit better. And that's things like having difficult conversations. Think about it. I want you to put yourself in a situation where you find somebody in your family of origin or extended family, or maybe somebody at work where you just absolutely cannot stand being around them. I mean, think about it. We all have those people in our life, right? Mm-hmm. I can think of somebody in my family that I don't want to have a conversation with. And our first initial reaction is to avoid the situation and to ruminate and have a lot of negative thoughts about that. But we can, if we promote not avoiding those situations, but teaching people how to have those conversations and confidently leaning into that, we're going to erase a lot of problems that occur by just the same ruminating patterns happening over and over again. So, because it is uncomfortable as it is, it's necessary to develop those skills. So we stay away from things like shame and blame, being problem focused for too long, waiting because you don't want to give a referral to somebody because you're afraid they're going to be offended. We just need to really get away from the fear of what could go wrong and into just very like, hey, this is what I'm observing. Tell me if you don't want this information, but I've thought about this. Can we have a conversation about that? People will not pull away, but if you don't have those conversations, communication will break down. And in a company that grew really, really fast, there's a mess load of communication issues here because we went from a tiny itty bitty little family to a giant, like a big company. I mean, we're a moderate size right now, but big for us. In a very short amount of time. So there are growing pains. So having those principles are really necessary. In terms of what we do, I know you hear what you've heard me say, what we do here, but there are ways that as a company, if you can't have a life coach on staff, although I highly recommend it because it really saves an enormous amount of time. And when you're looking at comparing that against insurance benefits, how much money is being spent in insurance and bringing trainers in and all of that, it really does make sense financially. But if you're not able to do that, developing relationships with EAP, and having contracts with very specific mental health providers that are willing to allow you to contact them immediately to bridge a session instead of waiting for 3 months, giving them just a number where they might have to wait 2 or 3 months to get an appointment for an intake. Being able to have somebody who is going to work with your company that will get somebody in quicker, and bringing in training into your company for things like communication skills, emotion regulation, managing mental health disorders, engagement, focus, and motivation, all of those sorts of situations. Because we had, because of COVID, OCD has gone through the roof, not only for people in a company, but in our families. And that has been an escalating trigger. So having having open conversations about fear and the balance between whether or not we're pushing information away or whether or not we're ruminating on it and creating more anxiety. We have to be more open about those topics. And so I think there are ways as companies that we can actually do that and promote mental health through training, through specialized contracts with people through EAP, but having those conversations more regularly and openly.
Great. Well, I know that I have a few questions for you, and guess what, Holly? We have some individuals who are posting questions in the chat. So that's a lot to take in, and I want to recognize it is a unique situation that your organization has to have you on full time, and you referenced EAPs. And one thing that I want to note is in our training and coaching here at WCWI, one thing that we really dive into is encouraging organizations to reevaluate your services with your EAP. More so, when I say reevaluate, is ensuring that you're using everything that you have at your fingertips with your EAPs. Yes. And they have lots of opportunities for you to collect data on the usage, and the uses of their services with your employees. So, and there's ability to customize, there's ability to reconnect, and then also too, not even reaching out to a third party, but coaching your managers and your leadership about mental health and how to have those soft skills in leadership and what is trauma-informed care, all leads to having a place of, right, we've talked about a place of belonging in June when we're talking about inclusion and diversity. Yes. Creating cultures where you can have open communication, but safe and respectful communication as well. But then also when it comes to psychological safety, right, it is so much bigger than that, especially within this pandemic. And we don't know what the triggers are for our employees, but we do know that a pandemic is extra stress, which means it's a trigger for anyone who may already be at their max capacity. So it is our responsibility as people leaders to address this and to support our teams. So as everyone was listening to me, get on my little soapbox, because as you can see, I'm passionate about this. We have a few questions coming in for you, Holly, and one of them, we're gonna get right to it, right? If you're a small organization, and small employer, let's go for a more specific question. Do you have resources that you're willing to share with everyone in a follow-up email as to what they can use if they don't have access to the full-time life coach or therapist?
Yes, absolutely. I feel like that's being able to bring somebody in to train, and just so you're aware, I would have no problems scheduling that into my time to come in and do some training if that's ever necessary. But there are people who will openly come in and train managers and provide like a half day seminar or a 2-hour luncheon seminar, giving tools specifically for that. One of the tools we use is called SAM. SAM is when you're in a difficult situation with a coworker or somebody else, you take the time to first see others, then you adjust your efforts, and then you measure the progress and the change according to the plan you create with them. That little SAM we have posted, because that means in order to see somebody, you have to ask questions. You can't go in with the idea that we're going to solve that in a 5-minute meeting and you do the talking. So managers have to understand how to use a tool. You're less likely to react to a situation and respond to your own fear if you have a tool that you're focused on. And so using information that you are presenting to your people, using that in that moment, like being able to say, this is a good opportunity for us to use the influence pyramid, or this is important for us to sit down and use the SAM map. It may be, hey, I just want to meet to learn in this situation so that you and I can learn what you need, I can respond to that, and we can create a plan together. Those are tools that we can use in the workplace that really promote solutions and promote connection. Because when connection is there, people will be open about what they need and things get solved faster.
Great, thank you. So I have a question for we're going to open up the platform, a member resource group, to group discussion. And I want to hear just from others who are participating, what are you doing in support of creating psychological safe workplace, whether your employees are on site or remote? So I'm going to open this up for the chat function. And Terry, I do see some notes from you as well. So if you guys can share what you're doing, this is what we're here for, as a community to connect. What are others finding success with? Let's share our stories and our strategies and how we're supporting our people. Holly, my other question to you was also, if you have remote employees, how are you serving them? So if you want to participate with this in the chat function, we're going to filter that question right in there.
I can answer that right away as long as I'm still on.
Okay.
That yes, we do have remote. We have all of our employees are allowed to make that determination for themselves, whether or not they're going to stay remote, they're going to do a hybrid of remote, or they're going to be back at headquarters. That was a strategy that our HR used to make it person specific. So based on your needs, you are able to make that decision for yourself, as long as you are following the rubric of your job. So what you need to do to get your job fulfilled in a really great way. And since we've gone remote, and most people are doing remote right now, and still they're actually doing extremely well. So the fact that they were given the choice was really, really key.
Great, thank you. All right, we have a few. Let's see, we have Julia. She states in the chat function that as we've given a lot of thought to how to approach becoming an anti-racist organization, we quickly recognize the need to start with leadership education around deep listening and EQ.
Yes.
So that as we go into listening groups to hear from our team about their experiences, we've got leaders who are truly ready and able to listen. Yes, thank you. I absolutely love that, Julia. I think it is very common to hear that as organizations pivot their strategies, they're also pivoting their education and training to focus on what they need, as we all adventure into the unknown. I don't even want to say into the unknown, as we transition forward to serve our people. So thank you for that. Let's see here. We have Terry, you stated we provided virtual peer-led support groups, varying times, days of weeks. Let's see, they're voluntary. One group was specific to furloughed employees, and that was well received. Yes, still serving employees even though their circumstances have changed. Terry, I also noticed your comment in regarding more information on Holly's Mindful Monday, Thankful Thursday. I have a detailed list of all the resources I want Holly to share if she's willing. So don't worry, everyone. In the follow-up email, I will be sure to give those resources to you. Emily, you have a question of, do you have any advice to new networking or support groups for diversity and inclusion? Yes. Holly, do you want to go that route for about 1 to 2 more minutes, and then we're going to navigate to the physical side of safety?
Can you just repeat the question one more time?
Yes. Do you have any advice to new networking or support groups for diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, like I feel like in our organization, we create our own. You know the way kids in high school will create their own club? We do that sort of stuff here as well. And everybody has, like, it's our communication system. We use something called Slack, where everyone is allowed to create their own group and their own channel, and to encourage people to join that. I think when it comes to inclusivity, that's a great way to do it, is to give people the baton to go and do that, rather than waiting for somebody else to guide you to that. So if somebody says, hey, we think we need this group, or we would like this resource, at Delta we'll say, create it, we'll support it.
Mhm.
So that allows that person, not as a passive recipient, but as an active person that grows something that they're passionate about, that they believe in, and that they want to spread, that's going to promote a better workplace. That's one way to do it.
That's great. Thank you. I'm hearing autonomy, freedom to do it, support, and ownership as well in that. So thank you, Holly. I greatly appreciate you sharing your story and your strategies with us. We are going to switch gears to the physical side of safety, but in the spirit of virtual learning, of connection, I am excited to announce that next week we are launching the registration for our 30th annual employee wellbeing conference. You guys, 30 years. This is amazing. I have been a part of them for 7 or 8, but this will be our first virtual experience, and it's going to be our first experience where the conference is 2 days. And it's 2 days because you may be noticing we have upped our game to 4 keynotes. 4 keynotes who include David Honeycutt, Corey, Carew, Sandro Gallia, and Donna Pale. So more to come, but in the spirit of idea sharing and virtual learning and connection, here's our friendly reminder to you. But we're going to switch gears here, right? Because in the strategy of creating safe places to work, right, there's 2 components that you need each to have a true sense of safety. And we've gone through the route of the psychological safety, and what we heard here was connection, open communication, the yes, we're here for you, and Holly's going to give a list of all the acronyms she shared and the resources that we can connect you to in hopes to help you as a people leader navigate those services of mental health. But during that part 2 survey, I was hunting Jay down, as truth be told, to be an idea sharer because of the strategies that he shared in support of here's what we're doing at Hellwig Carbon Products in creating a safe workplace physically. This is what we're doing in the physical environment. In my conversation with Jay, I was just drawn to his story because of how driven he was to stay ahead of the game of research. He mentioned that, you know, he recognized that the data that the general population was receiving on COVID-19 was 1 to 2 weeks late, and they were persistent in staying ahead and actually kicked strategies into place at Hellwig Carbon weeks before the Safer at Home Act was in place. And I just commend that call to action. So Jay Kanisser is a 3rd generation shareholder at Hellwig Carbon Products. He was the VP of marketing and part of the management team from 1995 to 2017. And now a sales and service representative for Southern Wisconsin. In 2012, he's one of the fittest execs, and I'm going to share a lovely fun fact, which, Jay, I appreciate you sharing this. He has a hobby farm, and with this hobby farm, they make maple syrup in spring. They have 15 hens for free-range organic eggs and 2 goats that help eat the invasive plants within their hobby farm. And I love that insight. I feel like every conversation, Jay, we get to know you a little deeper here. So Jay, with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to you and welcome your story in creating a physically safe place. And if you need assistance in, let's see, your muting, please let me know.
Okay, Lisa, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah, I had trouble with my laptop, so apologize for, video, but I'm glad the audio works fine. So yeah, thanks again for the invitation to tell our story. I just wanted to go through kind of a sequence of events. When the COVID thing started, and we were all watching the news, and it seemed to be on the coasts. And we were meeting with our management team. It was kind of challenging to tell what should we do, because it seemed like this is a New York problem, or it was in Washington State, and it really wasn't in the Midwest yet. So, but we had the discussion: what would we do if there was a COVID case at Hellwig? And we are an essential business, and in fact, we received hundreds of letters from our customers stating that they wanted to make sure that we'd remain open to be able to supply them products. So early on, we did determine that we were going to stay open even if there was a case, unless someone shut us down. But I think there was some level of fear early on that we didn't want to overreact. And it wasn't until I received a research paper actually forwarded to me from my son. It was written by Thomas Poyes. He's a Master of Science in Engineering from Stanford. But he wrote an article about coronavirus, why you must act now. And what really convicted me about the article is that whatever you're hearing on the news and the data you're seeing at the time is about 2 weeks old, due to the way this virus spreads and its exponential increase. So that really convicted me to say, we got to do something now. We can't wait. And we have to act as if the virus is already in-house. Because early on, there was really limited testing, and the testing results were taking days, if not weeks, to get that feedback. So that's almost too late. So we met as a team, and March 23rd, we really laid down some physical guidelines. So number one, anybody that comes to work sick would be sent home. And we probably sent home some people that obviously didn't have COVID, but it's too dangerous to have them there at work. So even if it was just the flu or a cold, they were often sent home. We shut down our food service that we have on site. We determined that was not a good idea. And then we went to 2 different shifts in production. We have about 250 people on site, and so we ran a split shift, 5 a.m. to noon, and then at 12:30 to 8. And that was to reduce the number of people in our facility at any one time. In the office, we encouraged those that could work from home to work from home, and we reduced the employee density in the office 50%. No travel, no visitors. And I think the really key for us and what we were able to do is we've been doing the health risk assessments since 2000. So we have a long history of information on our employees' health and wellness. And so we have an on-site nurse practitioner. She reviewed all the HRAs, and she met with each employee who was in the high-risk group. And unfortunately, we got about 30% of our population at Hellwig that is in that high-risk category. And that was very concerning to us. So whether they're diabetic or high blood pressure or overweight, etc. So that was helpful, and we really wanted to explain the risks to those people staying at work and what they needed to do to stay safe with this virus. We also canceled all in-person meetings. All the internal doors in the facility were propped open, even including bathrooms. And we practiced the social distancing, the 6 feet. And then anyone that had traveled by air was in a 14-day quarantine. And that included some officers of the company that were traveling. And then we also closed our fitness center. So those are the steps that we took immediately to address the concern that we could get this in-house. And we're located right on the northwest side of Milwaukee. And when the virus started to hit the city, that was exactly kind of the epicenter where things were happening. So, and that's where our employees live and work. A little bit, that was more the short-term physical changes, and then a little bit longer term, about the week of the 26th, we started taking temperatures of all our employees as they entered the building. We required employees to wear masks, which originally weren't readily available. We did find some face scarves that we gave out to the employees in the interim until we could get the correct mask set up. We also marked our production floors to show the 6 feet spacing. So as our production people actually punch in and out of the facility, the time clock, so we had to make sure they stayed the right distance apart. We installed all touchless faucets throughout the facility. And then I think another real key was communicating with the employees how to stay safe, because I'm not sure that everybody is that well educated on it. And that's what the graphic is up on the screen, the keys of washing hands and social distancing, not avoid touching your face and eyes and mouth, those types of things. And then finally, we really emphasized ways to boost your immune system, because I think that's a key to fighting off the virus. So getting proper sleep, getting outside in the sun or taking vitamin D, to exercise regularly, and then we also encourage supplements that were found in the research to be helpful with the virus, including garlic, astragalus, vitamin C, and vitamin D. So I think short term, it was all about how do you keep the virus out of the company or the best we can, and then long term is more emphasizing what our employees can do to stay healthy. So that was the sequence of events. And we've been fortunate. We did get our first case July 7th. I think I say we're fortunate because I think we thought it would have happened a lot sooner. And then we just received a second case July 25th. In both of those instances, they picked it up outside of the building. And so we feel that the atmosphere we've created inside Hellwig, we're doing all we can to keep our employees safe. So maybe at this point, Lisa, I can open it up to some questions, but that was kind of the sequence of events of what we did at Hellwig.
Thank you, Jay. And I know in our conversation that you and I had, we acknowledged that, sometimes in order to create safety, right, when we develop more policies, different procedures, and we truly manipulate the physical environment, that sometimes that negatively affects the feeling of psychological safety, right? There's more change, and or it's making the problem real for people because you're truly seeing change. And I know that you provided support in PTO for those employees who that concern was very significant, and also resources into federal programs that could support those employees. My question to you is besides PTO or working with the program set at the federal and state level, how did you support employees who address concern to these changes?
Well, we try to remain really flexible in that, this is unprecedented. None of us had ever been through anything like this before. And there was some high anxiety and fear for some employees and that wanted to stay home. If it was a situation where we could accommodate and they could work from home, we certainly did that. If not, we worked with them to either utilize PTO, or we even offered that they could take time off without pay. And then there were the other programs that they could fall into. So as far as the physical environment goes, I think it was the very visible changes were the closing of the food service, the internal doors that were kept open, and the social distancing and mask wearing. And that actually, we had a fair number of employees that weren't buying in on this whole thing early on. And so we had to continue to reemphasize how important it was to stay safe.
Great. I want to connect with everyone here. Are there any additional questions for Jay? Jay, and you answered one of my prior questions of, what are you focusing on for the next step here the next 6 months to year, and you mentioned that it would be keeping your employees healthy and perhaps looking at the immunity boosting factors. Is there anything else you would add to that?
Well, I think long term, I really view this as an opportunity. I mean, short term, we're worried about the virus and how do you avoid it and staying safe. But long term, it's an opportunity to really look at the overall health of our employees and what we can do to improve that. And hopefully the fear of getting the virus motivates some individuals to change their individual health. And they can work very closely with, in our case, we have a on-site nurse practitioner that can make recommendations of changes in their lifestyle, diet, exercise, etc., so that long-term they're going to be less susceptible to this type of virus. So.
Great. Thank you, Jay, and thank you for sharing your story. I commend your efforts for, taking action, staying on top of the research, and then, really looking at that physical environment of how are we going to create a physically safe place for our employees, especially with the dynamic culture and environment that you have at Hellwig. I recognize that it is 2:01, and what we have left in our member resource group was 2 additional questions. One was to take pulse on what everyone on this call is doing in support of physically safe workplaces, but in order to keep tabs here on time and everyone's prior engagements, I want to mention that I was able to connect with Tammy Flora, who is the Vice President of Human Resources at Masters Gallery Foods and another essential business. And her pandemic team has really worked tirelessly to focus on both aspects of safety. And here, within their efforts, I'll share them in the follow-up email, but I do want to mention that one of their strategies was putting in place team meetings. And I know many of us has scheduled more team meetings weekly and so on, but theirs were a little bit different in the sense that it was their leadership meeting with 25 people at a time, ensuring that they met with everyone throughout their organization. And these team meetings, she kind of joked that they were, sometimes she felt like a mom and dad meeting, solely in the sense of they were sitting down and they were saying, so this is what's happening, here's what we can do, and really providing that opportunity to have the friendly reminders of to create safety outside and inside the workplace. And also too, here's how we're helping you, here's what our plan of action is, and having those team meetings and making sure it was coming from the leadership. And she mentioned they had over 20 meetings, but they felt that it was their due diligence to have these in-person meetings and ensure that they met with everyone within Masters Gallery Foods. Besides that, they're also using their EAP program to enhance the offering for dealing with uncertainty, homeschooling, which we'll get to next, emotional support, and then also those adult interactions that we used to have, and now we're transitioning to what are those connections. They have provided strategies for that physical safety, very similar to Jay and his team at Hellwig Carbon, of touchless faucets, mandatory masks since May 18th. They have a remote workforce and also the skeleton crew as well, additional sanitizing, cleaning staff, no shared food supplies, and hired a third-party cleaning company to come in to fumigate the common areas. The other aspect of their strategies that I wanted to share with you is they facilitated an employee readiness to work survey, or return to work pulse survey. And in spirit of her sharing her story and her strategies, I'm going to share that their pulse survey was through Qualtrics and that it was free. And this free survey had sample questions of how comfortable do you feel returning to work? What specific concerns do you have returning to the office or workplace? What are you looking forward to when you go back to the office and why? And it was also their opportunity for Masters Gallery Foods to help educate their employees on changes in company policies and their own personal role in maintaining a safe working environment. So that is why I'm sharing this free tangible resource, because that is what we do. We share what's working for everybody else, and this Qualtrics free return to work pulse survey is something that they use. There's many surveys that you can use out there, but I always like to put my notes and my strategy sharing into the fact that we may be, yes, we're discussing human basic needs. Yes, we're discussing components of mental health and psychological safety, inclusion, and belonging. But what will always help us as people leaders is ensuring that we can maybe use the data that we have at our fingertips to help us reconnect with our employees, their needs, to help them provide feedback to us and clearly define what we need to focus on. So I've included the URL link here for this free Return to Work Pulse survey. And if you have additional questions, you can contact me and also Tammy as well. This information will be included in the follow-up survey. I'm receiving a few questions. Yes, Karen, you are spot on in time, because my next question is a common one we received in our statewide survey of how is your organization addressing the topic of changes to schooling in the fall? So Karen Richmond, thank you for posing that question in the chat. I quickly scanned it. I saw a school district announcement, distance and virtual. So I assume that this is the direction you were going. So if everyone can, in the last couple minutes of our member resource group, please take the time to have this discussion. I can help facilitate it with the use of our chat. And we can go from there. So Sarah, you mentioned that yes, your district is going virtual as well. And you would also love more information. So is anyone looking into this and how you can address your employees next year? Or are we all in a little bit of a question zone? All right. Well, here's what we'll do. We will pose that question as a poll to our membership, and we will connect with everyone and share these answers. That's what we do as a WCWI community. I completely understand that it is 2:07. I want to thank everybody for jumping on our member resource group, and especially our idea sharers. Holly and Jay, you did a phenomenal job. We appreciate it, everything that you guys are all doing in leading your people through this and creating these safe places to work. And otherwise, we hope to see you a part of our annual conference in October and also our next member resource group. Thank you and have a great day.